Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Awaken the World. My name is Garhen, and today we present our help and advice session. Nice to see everyone this morning, and I hope Kelly will be able to make it on. She seems to be lost again, so we'll give her some time. This morning, we're going to have a little discussion about the rule of law, and this is kind of important because we really live in this society where we're supposedly governed by these rules and the law. And one of the things I've noticed is that the law doesn't actually work. No matter how bad you make the threats, no matter how long you make the prison terms, none of it actually seems to function. All we end up with is more and more people in prisons and more people not receiving justice in any way, and we're going to talk about justice as well. So I want to say a big good morning to Jennifer and Jackie. Nice to see you both this morning. At least you guys found it. And it looks like Kelly may have finally found it, so that's good. I keep asking her to bookmark these places to come back to easily, and it's a work in progress. Let's see if her comment actually manages to make it through. We'll find out. So, without further ado, if there are no pressing questions that anyone has this morning or needing any help and advice, and of course, please interject if you do have something that you need to a little bit of advice on. We're going to start. And the rule of law. The rule of law is the authority and influence of law in society, especially when viewed as a constraint on individual and institutional behavior. Hence, the principle whereby all members of a society, including those in government, are considered equally subject to publicly disclosed legal codes and processes. Sounds like a lot of mumbo-jumbo. It's really a big lie, because of course we do not live under this rule of law. We live under a very twisted rule of law that institutions, government members, and other members who can afford to subscribe to a different set of laws than the average person does. And it is so rampant and so out in the open that we even had our Prime Minister here comment that the reason why his brother got off a marijuana charge back in the day was because, his dad was Prime Minister and a lawyer and knew the right people. And that's, he said that right on national TV. I mean, these are the type of things that we see every day. If you're in a position of authority in any way, you are treated differently under the law. And of course, we say on paper that that's not the case. But, I have lived in all stratums of society purposefully. And I can tell you, when you're living down in a rooming house in a very poor neighborhood, and the rooming house is known to have issues with drug addicts and drunks, despite the number of really good people that are there. The police will come and bang on your door for no reason to find out if someone is there in the middle of the night. They would never do so in a higher class neighborhood. They would never bother to do so. The particular night in question I'm thinking of, I happened to be out meditating. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was meditating in the dark. And the police didn't even have a name. They were just looking for somebody. And they thought, since this house was known that there was some drug addicts here, that quite possibly he had stopped by. And this is the sort of insanity we deal with. Individual and institutional behavior. Oh, she made it. Way to go, honey. It's really strange when your wife is 15 feet away from you and yet she can't find the place to comment. It's kind of funny because, of course, it's actually a whole world away as far as the internet is concerned. Yeah, it really is. And that's, yeah, at least she hears everything. You can't miss out that. And you see enough of my face already, sweetie. You don't need to look at me in the video, too. As a matter of fact, I would turn the video off if I were you. We are supposed to be all equally subject to publicly disclosed legal codes and processes. Now, you know, I've done a lot of advocating in the court system, and I've spoken on a lot of people's behalves in the court system, including Kelly's during her divorce. You know, I've stood up for a number of people in front of a judge. Why? Because those supposedly publicly disclosed legal codes are mumbo jumbo to the vast majority of people who read them. They make no sense. They don't understand what's really being said. And that's why the Bible says the word kills. You know, we are admonished and warned in every moment to not get tied up on the definition, but instead look at the feeling that was representative underneath. In our society today, we live in a state where our supposed freedom isn't really freedom. And the reason it isn't freedom is exactly what John Locke had wrote. And John Locke wrote that freedom in society means being subject only to laws made by a legislature that apply to everyone, with a person being otherwise free from governmental and private restrictions upon liberty. We do not live in a free society anymore. We live in a society where we are controlled, and depending on your perceived value to that society will determine how those laws are applied, how those words are interpreted. You see, that's the problem with words, is they're always up for interpretation. And, you know, a lawyer will argue, and, you know, there's a really good joke. And, you know, I'm sorry, but lawyers and accountants, I love you as people. But as your chosen occupation, you know, you can add bankers in there too. You've made a big mistake. Do you know what you have when you have 1,000 lawyers and bankers buried up to their neck in the sand? Not enough sand. And of course, you know, I mean, no offense. You're all powerful spiritual beings having human experiences, but man, did you pick the wrong experience. You know, these people are the vultures of our system, the priests of money and law, who you must go and give sacrifice to them in order that they will approach the God of money or the God of law. The God of law. Right? That Old Testament God. We pay lawyers. They dress in robes. You know, especially here in Canada and in Britain, for example, in England and many other countries. They dress in robes and they approach this godlike figure and make the statement and the appeal on your behalf. Just like in the old days when God was behind the veil in the temple and you had to go in and hand the priests over enough cash to convince them to go take your appeal behind the veil. This is exactly what we're still doing today. And the rule of law has done nothing for the people who truly need to be protected by it. It never has. Why do we need the rule of law? Well, you know, religion didn't do it. You know, there's a lot of people out there who'll say, well, wait a minute, if you get rid of hell, human beings will have no curb on their behavior. Well, guess what? There is no hell, and it doesn't matter anyways, because human beings still have no curb on their behavior. You see, it doesn't matter how, like the fear of reprisal, it does not work. 25 years in jail or life imprisonment or the threat of the death penalty in the United States, in some of the states, doesn't stop people from murdering another. And then, of course, we have the other question. Is someone who steals a loaf of bread a thief if they're stealing it in order to feed themselves? Jackie says someone has to do these jobs, and I have to disagree, Jackie. People don't have to do them. The money and power does twist, absolutely. But we have to ask ourselves, do we have to live like this? Do we have to have accountants? Do we have to have lawyers? Do we have to have a court system? Are there not other better ways? Are there not ways that do not separate those who can have and deal with the law from those who can't? You know, if you're a poor black person living in the street or in a poor neighborhood in the United States, God help you if the police come for you. You're not going to have some rich lawyer. You're not going to have the money to make all the pleas. You're not going to have the knowledge to be able to fight the system. But the system will appoint someone. And I've dealt with these public attorneys, and yes, there are many good-hearted public attorneys, but the vast majority of them, they're just pieces of paper, one after another. They're not human beings. There are better ways to govern ourselves, and the one we're going to talk about is coming up next. The current state of the rule of law benefits the criminal far too often. And, you know, we have seen many examples right here surrounding our own strata complex of 10 units. The developer on the other side here who's destroyed a 20-plus-year-old gorgeous 300-foot hedge and caused it extreme damage. We're not really sure whether it's going to survive or not. And when I went down to talk during a council meeting at City Hall, talk to the mayor and the other council members, I was told, of course, off camera, that it's quite common. That the developer relies on the fact that most people don't want to spend the time and money to get a lawyer involved to make the developer have to pay for his damage. And the governments know about this. And the public officials know about this. And the city planner knows about this. And the inspector. We expect that behavior. And the answer is always the same. Well, you'll have to take them to court. When you put laws on paper, the people who will commit crimes, who will go against natural law, will simply use those words to find their way through so that they can continue to do as they wish anyways. They will look for the loopholes. They'll circumnavigate. They'll circumvent. They'll use a system that is so designed around the amount you can afford to pay to have that person speak on your behalf. You know, every time I've ever been in a courtroom, I've spoken on my own behalf, and I'm very grateful and thankful that I can absorb the legal jargon and understand the responses I need to make. But what about the average person? You know, what if our residence here was a small home with a single mother struggling to hold on to her home and her children. And you have a developer who tears up half her fence and destroys her hedge and damages her boulevard and kills her plants that she planted. She cannot afford to take that person to court. And yet the law, which would somehow protect her, isn't actually serving her, it's serving him. When we average all criminal statistics, and this isn't quite current, it's a few years old, okay, we find out that of reported crimes, only 22% of those ever actually see the inside of a courtroom. When it comes to sexual assault, only 35% are reported. That means 350 out of every 1,000 sexual assaults are ever reported. And out of those 350, only 22 or 1/5 or 70 of those will see the inside of a courtroom. And out of those 70, less than half will get the full conviction. 0.35% of sexual assault victims actually see justice. 35 out of 1,000. What a number. There is a better way. And the better way, of course, is the only thing that needs to be done that solves everything, and it is the problem underneath all of these symptoms. And that problem is our level of consciousness. Our level of consciousness as a society, and the way we are choosing to live our existence today, the way we are living under this false rule of law that applies to those who can afford to have someone interpret it for them to their benefit. All of these things are helping keep us from waking up. This monetary system we live under that is suppressing humanity and creativity, all in the name of the dollar. Highly advanced beings, HABs. This is my term. Highly advanced beings, highly awakened beings. No, we are all one. A highly awakened being would never consider harming another. Why? Because they understand that to harm another is actually to harm oneself. Because we are truly all one. Highly advanced or highly awakened beings understand that it is all stewardship. That you can never truly own anything. And theft would be a concept unimaginable. Because if you wanted something, you would simply go ask someone, and you would be given it. Highly advanced or highly awakened beings know that whatever actions they take in life will have consequences not only for themselves, but for the whole in which they are a living, breathing part of. Highly advanced beings or highly awakened beings would never attack another in anger with the intent to kill, because the other person wasn't doing as they wish, because highly advanced beings respect the right of everyone to express themselves as they choose. Yes, absolutely. Christ said to become like a child, and the reason why we have to become childlike is in childlike innocence we drop all the egoic sense of self that causes all these problems. And Jackie says it's gone too far. They don't give anyone a chance to get away from the almighty dirty dollar. And you're right. You know, all of these things come back to the same thing. And I have said this before, and I want to be crystal clear. I don't care how big your synagogue is, how big your temple is, how big your Catholic church is, or your Protestant ministry is. I don't care. You don't worship God. You can all sit here and say you worship God, but you don't worship God. You worship money as God. And you haven't done that out of choice. And yet we continue to do it out of choice. The God is money. And that's the problem. We don't see God in other people. We see God in that dollar bill. And Jackie points this out 100%. You don't have a chance to get away from it. You as an individual are an asset. That's why your name is in capitals. Take a look at your driver's license. Take a look at your birth certificate. It's all in capitals, just like a company. Why? Because you're an asset. You are a traded asset that represents cash. And what is cash? Cash is the worst form of cult, worship, control. Like the biggest cult of all is the cult of cash god. It trumps the rule of law. It trumps the invisible God. And it trumps the visible God around us. Nature. Everything we see, every plant, every tree, every animal, every lake, every forest, every person. All of those are trumped by a greater God, and that God is cash. Highly awakened beings, highly advanced beings know that to be controlled by something that simply does not exist. Money is bad. I'm sorry, honey. It's not a tool. It's a deterrent. You know, we've been convinced of this. We've been convinced, wow, you live in a money society, so, you know, you might as well stop looking at money as bad and look at it as a tool instead. It is a tool. It is a tool for the continued oppression, suppression, and destruction of our planet and the human race. That's the sort of tool money is. We live in a false system. We live in a system where what we would seem to think is democracy and freedom is far from it. My wife and I were talking just the day before yesterday about vehicles and how that if you own a vehicle, you are tied to whatever the oil companies decide to put that gasoline at. And funny enough, every single long weekend, every single major holiday, despite the fact that the Middle East may be quiet and that there's nothing going on, the price will go up. Why? That gas was delivered days ago at a lower price. Everywhere this money is being used to rape and rip away that which we are here to accomplish, that awakening, that creative, joyful expression of being that we have come here to do. Ah, S. Keen. I wonder who that could be. Good morning, Sharon. Nice to see you. And by the way, you're going to want to be here for the 1 p.m. at 1 o'clock on the Awaken the World YouTube channel. We're going to have a very special event today. We're going to have a discussion, and it's called The Only One Standing. And it should be fantastic, so I do hope you're all going to come. The highly awakened being, or highly awakening being, knows intrinsically inside of itself what we would call right behavior or wrong behavior. And we all have that. We all have that in us. You know when you're stepping over a line. You know when you're doing something that you would not agree with it being done to you. You can feel it in your gut and you can feel it in your heart. Because like I said, this energetic being that our body is, this body intelligence lives in perfect truth and alignment with higher self all the time. Why? Because higher self is manifesting it. The body intelligence is another part of our consciousness. It is a larger, quieter, more profound part of our being. And it resonates with our thoughts and it resonates with our actions, and it always directs us. It always lets us know. And yeah, money is a terrible hindrance. You know, right now on the planet, there's over 3 billion people who will never see enough money to go to a university or to actually have a healthy lifestyle. You know, less than 1% of the entire human species will ever see the inside of a classroom. And not grade school, but higher learning, if we can even call it that anymore. That too has become money-based. What's happening is all the energy that we were brought here to put into joyful creative expression, to fulfill that which we love to do, to give that gift to the whole and contribute to that awakening, all that energy is being redirected into mere survival, into struggling day to day to make ends meet under a whip and lash of a merciless God whose temples are banks and courthouses, financial institutions, and government offices. And no one ever seems to catch on that we can't seem to find enough money for social programs, but we can build warships whenever we need them. You know, it's not in the budget. In other words, the God of money has said no to this project. But this project over here, the God of money has said yes. And should this project that belongs to the people try to go to the court system, well, the God of money has already agreed with this one. The power lies here and the money lies here, and the court will agree with the money. Yeah, money is never a problem when it comes to war. It never is, and neither is litigation for those who can afford it. Most litigation comes down to who has the deeper pocketbook, who gives in first. That is not law. That is not justice. And what do we even mean by justice? You know, we have options. Restorative justice, bringing the person into the community, accepting them, loving them back, accepting our role. Our societies are creating the need for the rule of law on top of our own unconsciousness. Awakening is the only answer. Raising our consciousness is the only answer. Standing up, not against what we wish to see change, but standing up for the change, standing up for a new God, to supplant the God of money. And that is the God of respect for all of creation, the God of understanding that we are here for a short time in this life as a steward of all that comes through our hands. Not to take and use and discard, but to show in gratitude a love towards it and a caring of it and a respect for it, and then to gratefully pass it on to somebody else when the time comes. But we don't. In our greed and our tininess and our smallness and our lack of awakening, this is mine. You harmed me and I want you harmed in return. Where are we as a species? What choices do we make as individual beings? You know, the one thing Kelly will tell you about is, I don't care what the rules are. I don't care what the law says. I care about the truth that resounds within the core of my being, and that truth will be spoken out until the end of my breath. Stewardship, exactly. You'll never steal from something that you have the care of. But you'll certainly steal from something from someone who you think owns something that you don't have. We're going to wrap it up here. This is a really interesting topic and deserves being thought about deeply. Okay, what can we do? How do we stand when we are surrounded by such unconsciousness? When we are surrounded by corrupt systems and a corrupt god of money, how do we stand? And we must stand, and we must be that light. And that's going to lead us into the next video at 1 p.m. on the Awaken the World YouTube channel. And that is the only one standing. It'll be good to see you there. Have a wonderful day. Namaste to you all. Happy Sunday. And if you're here in Canada and you have a holiday coming up, I hope you're really enjoying the long weekend. Take care.